Previously, in the Aeneid, Virgil asked us if or even why the gods have so much anger that they would force a man as pious as Aeneas to undergo so much misfortune. In lines 12 through 22, we learn why. It's Juno's connection to Carthage and the future conflict between her favorite city and the city to be founded by Aeneas' descendants. We begin with an ancient city, and we should think that maybe it's Troy, but that hope gets destroyed by the second half of the line. Thurii refers to people from the city of Tyre, a city in Phoenicia, which is modern-day Syria, and line 13 informs us that this ancient city is Carthage, a Phoenician colony located in North Africa, close to Sicily, and commanding a very dominant place in the Mediterranean. Its geographic location is further established by the rest of line 13, not only opposite Contra, Italy, in the Mediterranean, but Carthage is also politically an adversary. And we have more shores here, Ostia, recalling the shores of Troy from the first line of the epic, and which Virgil uses to define ethnic borders. The words Carthago and Italiam being placed right next to each other reminds me of the Puniger tablet, a copy of an ancient Roman map not drawn to scale, where Carthage and Rome are literally right next to each other. There's more on the connection between Carthage and Rome at the end of this video. Tenuere, by the way, is an alternate form for tenuerunt. The ere ending onto the perfect stem is often used in poetry for metrical reasons, so the erunt would be too plodding here. Dives and Asperima describe Carthago. The city's name is feminine. Asperima takes an ablative studiis, very keen in its pursuits of war. Quam, in line 15, continues our discussion of Carthage, and unam describes quam, which one city. Fertur is translated as is said, and the perfect active infinitive, coluisse, depends on this verb, to have cherished. Magis more, which takes an ablative of comparison, terris omnibus. And finally, post habitas amo is an ablative absolute. We learn here that Juno ranks Carthage first, even with her beloved Samos, the island of her birth, and where there was a great, if not the greatest, temple to Hera, Juno to the Romans. Here we learn that Juno kept her arma and currus, her chariot. Ilius is genitive singular, referring to Juno, and even though it's normally Ilius in epic, the second I tends to be short, Ilius. This next bit can be a little confusing. So we start with the accusative object, this kingdom, referring to Carthage, and then go to the subject, the goddess Juno. Gentibus is dative for her people, and esse is the infinitive to be. So think about this. The goddess is doing something to this kingdom to be for her people. We're just missing the main verb, or verbs in this case. But we can get the gist of this line. We learn that Juno is holding and cherishing this kingdom with tenditque foetque. And don't forget that the two quays are translated both and. The condition here involves the present subjunctive, so it's a future less vivid, meaning that Juno is hoping for Carthage to be for her people if the fates were to allow it. But the subjunctive mood tells us that the fates aren't going to. And the qua here is really aliqua. Don't forget this rhyme. After si, nisi, num, and ne, ali takes a holiday, which means that Latin will leave out the indefinite prefix ali in clauses that begin with si, if, nisi, unless, or if not, num, whether, or ne, a negative particle. This happens a lot in Virgil, so file this away. The rest of this section is one indirect statement, governed by the head verb audierat. This is a syncopated form of audierat. It's a pluperfect indicative. She had heard. Since this is the end, I'm going to break from the lines of poetry and show you each indirect statement clause separately. So the first thing that she had heard was that, so remember we're an indirect statement, so the subject is in the accusative case and the verb is an infinitive. Progeniem Trojana sanguina duci. So progeniem, this offspring, would be the Romans, is the subject of duci, a present passive infinitive. So remember that third conjugation verbs have just a long I in the present passive infinitive. And Trojana sanguine, from Trojan blood. but blood in the sense of heredity rather than the red stuff that flows through your veins. Quai in the next line refers back to this progeny. Turias modifies Arches, so Tyrian citadels would be the city of Carthage. But verteret is imperfect subjunctive, so that means that this relative clause is likely a relative purpose clause, to destroy Carthage. The Romans were being pulled from Trojan blood in order to destroy Carthage, or so Juno had heard. The next clause of the indirect statement has populum as its accusative subject and venturum as the future infinitive. English likes to translate future infinitives after past tense head verbs with would. She had heard that a people would come. The rest of line 21 tells us more about these people. Late regem, a king far and wide, or maybe it's better to read regentem for regem, ruling, and bello superbum, proud in war. And we finish up this clause with a double dative, excidio Libiae. As with any double dative, we have a dative of purpose, excidio, and a dative of reference, Libiae. Literally, for the destruction, for Libya, and by extension North Africa, and really Carthage. But we can translate this double dative into more natural English with a purpose clause, to destroy Libya. And that would be the result of the Punic Wars and Rome's conquest of Carthage. And the last clause of the indirect statement has parcas, the fates, as the subject, and volere as the infinitive. So this is what the fates say. Rolling here is an interesting word. It's as if the fates, the parcae, are unrolling out future events as if they were in a scroll. And it's important to note that even the gods, Juno and Jupiter included, were bounded by the power of the fates. So in these lines, Virgil sets up Carthage and Rome to be adversaries, and Carthage is pretty much the equal of Rome. In fact, we see the same description applied to each city. Each dominates over a large area, hoc regnum for Carthage and late regem for Rome. And both are good at war, studiis asperma belli for Carthage and bello superbum for Rome. And when Aeneas finally makes it to Carthage later in this book, we'll see a city that looks very much like Rome, with a leader whose origin story is pretty similar to Aeneas's. And this is the struggle that will dominate the Western Mediterranean for the next 1,000 years. And the equality of these two people will explain Rome's future struggle in the Punic Wars and its subsequent greatness, when it will eventually destroy a rival but great city. Next, it was such a great burden to found the Roman race.